Hello, and welcome back to Scary Stories Told in the Rain. I know it's been quite a while since the last upload, and I truly appreciate your patience. A lot has been happening behind the scenes between finishing Gale, Yellow Brick Road, and navigating the holidays. Things have been non-stop. As I've mentioned before, the film is officially set to release in theaters on February 11th, and tickets will be available very soon, starting January 8th. If you'd like to be notified the moment tickets go live, you can click the link at the top of the description or in the pinned comment. Your support genuinely means more to me than I can put into words. All of the stories you're about to hear are allegedly true, so keep that in mind as you listen. Also, just a quick note, after the first 3 stories, this video will have very minimal ads, and that'll be it. Before we begin, I also want to mention that I currently host 3 podcasts. One of them is very similar to these videos, relaxing rain sounds paired with unsettling stories. The other 2 are different. One features a crackling fireplace ambiance, and the other leans more heavily into a darker, creepier atmosphere. I'd truly love it if you check them out. You'll find links to all of them in the description, and following those podcasts would mean a lot to me. One last thing before we start, I want to share your second exclusive sneak peek from my new film, Gale, Yellow Brick Road. What you're seeing now is a still image of an object that carries deep significance in the story, something gifted to our main character by a close friend. As always, thank you so much for being here. I know there are countless other things you could be watching, and I never take your time for granted. If you enjoy this type of content and haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It helps tremendously. I hope you enjoy what's ahead. Now, let's begin. Wendell was a panhandler I passed regularly near my college campus. Whenever I had spare change, I gave it to him. Normally, I stick to a strict rule of donating only to established local charities, places where I know exactly where the money is going. But Wendell was different. He sang opera, and not badly either. Even though it was obvious he wasn't busking by choice and was begging out of necessity, I admired that he was still trying to offer something in return. Plus, I hated carrying loose change, so I gave him what I could. It was never much, maybe $1 at a time. Sometimes I'd stop and talk with him, even when I didn't have money. He liked making students laugh with impressions or jokes. He was older, probably in his 40s or 50s, while I was an undergrad, so our conversations were brief and casual. We talked about the weather, current events, nothing too personal. Occasionally, though, he'd share something deeply intimate out of nowhere, and I'd feel obligated to respond with something vaguely personal in return. Once, he mentioned that he almost attended college on a baseball scholarship, but drugs derailed everything. I remember awkwardly replying with something like, "That's rough. I play volleyball, but not on a scholarship." Then I'd excuse myself and move on. One day, I was walking with my academic advisor when Wendell called out to me. I didn't want to be rude, so I stopped, said hello, and introduced my advisor. As soon as we walked away, my advisor looked visibly disturbed and asked why a homeless man knew me by name. I explained our casual friendship. He warned me that the homeless population in this city was very different from what I might be used to back home. I assumed he was being elitist, but he doubled down before we parted ways, cautioning me not to engage with or give money to chronically homeless individuals. According to him, those who remained on the streets long term often had serious criminal or addiction histories. I was shocked. He was usually progressive and compassionate, so I tried countering with everything I'd learned in his own classes: systemic inequality, capitalism, social neglect. He wasn't persuaded. His stance was simple. Regardless of how Wendell ended up homeless, he was now, and I should behave accordingly. I brushed it off, internally labeling him out of touch. If anything, his warning made me feel validated, like I was doing something brave and righteous. I actually became friendlier with Wendell, sharing more about my life. Then one day, he seemed different, irritable, distant, until he suddenly asked, "So, your boyfriend, do you two live together?" I was confused. I didn't have a boyfriend. When I told him the man he'd seen me with was just my academic advisor, His mood instantly shifted back to friendly. I didn't recognize it as a red flag at the time. Soon after, Wendell began giving me small gifts, a flower, a piece of scrap metal, random trinkets. I never refused, assuming it helped him keep some sense of dignity. One of my roommates commented that it was strange, but I dismissed her concerns as classist paranoia. My advisor noticed and confronted me again, warning that I might be getting manipulated. When I remembered Wendell's history with drugs, something finally clicked. I decided to create some distance. Then the pandemic hit. Classes went remote, and I moved back to my parents' house to save money. About 3 weeks later, I was watching a friend's Instagram story when I heard Wendell singing opera in the background. I brushed it off until later that night, when something about it wouldn't stop bothering me. I rewatched it and realized the video wasn't filmed near campus. It was from my hometown. That scared me, but I rationalized it. People were moving everywhere during the pandemic. Still, I didn't tell my parents they'd warned me against talking to homeless people, and I didn't want to sound dramatic. Nothing happened for a while. Then a former classmate called me. She said a homeless man downtown had asked her very specific questions about me, my major, my volleyball club. I convinced myself it was coincidence. Eventually, I returned to campus and saw Wendell on his usual corner within a week. I stopped talking to him completely. After finals, I went to visit my brother in another state. On the 9th morning there, I was woken by my brother arguing quietly at the front door. He looked furious when he turned to me. He thought I had invited a much older boyfriend to his house. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. It was Wendell. He had followed me across state lines. What happened next escalated quickly. Wendell began pounding on windows, shouting that I was his girlfriend. When he punched through the glass and blood started spraying, my brother finally called 911. The police arrived within minutes. Wendell went peacefully, but as they took him away, he started singing opera. I want to clarify that this next story uses reconstructed dialogue. None of it was recorded, and the exact wording may not be accurate, but the events are. This happened in 2015, when I was 16. Continues seamlessly into the Miller's Fun Park story, rewritten with the same pacing, tension, and events as your original transcript. We never told either of our parents what happened. Looking back now, I really wish we had, because there was clearly something deeply wrong with that man. But at the time, we were terrified of how they might react or what they might say. I think part of us believed they'd somehow blame us for it. So it stayed between the two of us, something we didn't even talk about with each other for months after that night. Needless to say, we never returned to Miller's Fun Park. Please, if you take anything from this, be extremely careful when you're out late at night. All right. I've never shared this story before, but I feel like this is the right place to finally let it out. This was one of the most frightening nights of my life, and, even now, it still makes me uneasy to drive alone after dark. The only person in my real life who knows this story is one of my older brothers, who was there in the aftermath. For some context, I'm currently a 21-year-old woman living in Ohio. When this happened, my family was in the process of moving from a well-known suburb outside a major city to a small rural farming town. My parents were never city people. They both grew up on farms in the South, and our family had always lived in similar environments until I was about to start high school. They were eager to return to that lifestyle. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, 3 older brothers, and once I graduated high school, I was the last one tied to a school district. That summer, my parents decided it was the perfect time to move. The new town was only about 45 minutes away. Instead of hauling everything at once and overwhelming ourselves with boxes, we decided to move portions of our belongings every day or so over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. Most of the drive between the two places was straight highway, so I became extremely familiar with the route. That's part of what made this night so terrifying. I had made that drive dozens of times, nearly 50, and felt completely comfortable doing it. My guard was fully down. I'm a pretty small person, about 5'3" and roughly 140 pounds. Even though my dad taught me self-defense growing up, I'm the kind of person who freezes when faced with confrontation or pressure. Honestly, it's a miracle I got out of this unharmed. That night, I had gone to visit some old friends in the neighborhood we were moving away from. Since I was already nearby, I decided to stop at our old house afterward to pack up a few things to bring back. I don't remember the exact time, but it was around 10 or 11 at night, and it was completely dark. Ohio summers can be brutally hot, even at night, and I get car sick easily in muggy air. My car's AC barely worked, so I usually drove with the windows down. The roads were mostly empty, maybe 10 cars passed me the entire drive. A little over halfway through my second main highway, I reached an intersection. There was a gas station on my right, and to the left, nothing but a river and a bridge. It was a 4-lane road, and I happened to be in the far right lane because I needed to turn further up ahead. That detail matters. I stopped at a red light, music playing, my left arm resting out the open window. I hadn't noticed another car pull up beside me until I heard loud voices. I have ADHD, so extra noise cuts right through whatever I'm focused on, and I turned my head. I immediately regretted it. A man was leaning halfway out of the passenger window, staring directly at me with a wide grin. The look in his eyes made my stomach turn. Apparently, he had been trying to get my attention. I turned forward quickly, hoping not to encourage him. Then I heard someone smack metal. He was slapping his hand against the outside of his car door, trying to get me to look again. Another guy started whistling that familiar, demeaning whistle women hear far too often. I felt anger rising, but I kept staring straight ahead, silently begging the light to change. The problem was that the traffic sensors in that town were awful. With almost no cars on the road, the light wasn't changing. My refusal to engage only seemed to encourage them. They started shouting things like, "Hey baby, get out and come with us," and "We'll take you somewhere fun," and "We're not gonna hurt you." My hands were shaking. I rolled up my window and locked my doors. That's when the front passenger shouted an insult and flung his door open. He got out and walked straight toward my car, trying to open the back passenger door. I was trapped. To get to the gas station or cross the bridge, I would have had to pass him and his car. Running wasn't an option. I was frozen. My hands were clenched around the steering wheel so tightly I couldn't feel them. He moved to my window and began slamming his palm against the glass hard enough that I thought it might shatter. When I refused to look at him, he stopped just long enough to spit on my window. Something snapped in me. As he lifted his arm like he was about to smash the glass, I hit the gas, ran the red light, and sped off. In my rearview mirror, I saw all 3 men standing outside the car. One of them was holding something in his hand. I don't want to think about what it was. I cried the entire drive home. My parents were working late, so my older brother was the only one home. He tried to calm me down, but I barely slept. I even locked my bedroom door, even though I knew they hadn't followed me. I avoid that road now. Completely. Then I heard someone smack metal. He was slapping his hand against the outside of his car door, trying to get me to look again. Another guy started whistling that familiar, demeaning whistle women hear far too often. I felt anger rising, but I kept staring straight ahead, silently begging the light to change. The problem was that the traffic sensors in that town were awful. With almost no cars on the road, the light wasn't changing. My refusal to engage only seemed to encourage them. They started shouting things like, "Hey baby, get out and come with us," and "We'll take you somewhere fun," and "We're not gonna hurt you." My hands were shaking. I rolled up my window and locked my doors. That's when the front passenger shouted an insult and flung his door open. He got out and walked straight toward my car, trying to open the back passenger door. I was trapped. To get to the gas station or cross the bridge, I would have had to pass him and his car. Running wasn't an option. I was frozen. My hands were clenched around the steering wheel so tightly I couldn't feel them. He moved to my window and began slamming his palm against the glass hard enough that I thought it might shatter. When I refused to look at him, he stopped just long enough to spit on my window. Something snapped in me. As he lifted his arm like he was about to smash the glass, I hit the gas, ran the red light, and sped off. In my rearview mirror, I saw all 3 men standing outside the car. One of them was holding something in his hand. I don't want to think about what it was. I cried the entire drive home. My parents were working late, so my older brother was the only one home. He tried to calm me down, but I barely slept. I even locked my bedroom door, even though I knew they hadn't followed me. I avoid that road now. Completely. When I was a child, we lived in Baltimore City until I was 12. This incident happened when I was about 7 or 8. I was born mute due to malformed vocal cords, which plays a role here. Our house was 6 blocks from my school, and sometimes I walked home alone. My mom hated the idea, especially because I couldn't scream, but I convinced her. I carried a whistle and took self-defense classes, but I was still just a kid. One afternoon while walking home, I was grabbed from behind near an alley. The smell hit me first, sweat and rot. His arms crushed me, dragging me backward. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't reach my whistle. I kicked, struggled, but his grip only tightened. I couldn't breathe. I started to feel dizzy, terrified I would black out and never wake up. Then I heard someone shout. 2 people ran toward us. The man dropped me and ran. I collapsed on the pavement. Someone touched my shoulder, asking if I was okay, but I panicked and ran home. The police came later. They never found him. 2 years ago, after leaving work late one night, I stopped at a new gas station near my neighborhood. A man inside stared at me. A car full of men followed me across the lot. One tried to time leaving the store with me. I escaped only because another customer walked out at the same time. They waited by my pump afterward, watching. I never went back. My heart was racing, partly from the medication, partly from pure fear. I knew morphine had a tendency to amplify paranoia, so I tried to ground myself and breathe through it. Still, when I saw headlights appear behind me, stretching my shadow long across the pavement, my chest tightened. Instantly, I started calculating. I was roughly 300 meters, maybe 1,000 feet from my building. Once there, I'd need to pull out my ID and unlock the entrance. A slow, automatic magnetic door. I couldn't run. I could barely manage a steady walk. I was heavily medicated. It was the middle of the night, and I was completely alone. No nearby residential buildings. No one who could hear me scream. That's when the panic truly set in. The car caught up and slowed to match my pace. I realized the driver wasn't alone anymore. There was someone in the passenger seat now, and movement in the back as well. I didn't turn my head. I pretended I hadn't noticed anything. My earphones were in, but there was no music playing. I'd never turned it back on after the bus ride. I just kept walking, silently begging them to leave me alone. I tried to move faster, but the pain was overwhelming and tears spilled down my face. I could hear them calling out to me, but not clearly enough to make out their words. Finally, I saw the small lane that led to my building. I shrugged off my backpack and shoved my hand into the front pocket, fumbling badly. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, my fingers numb, my nerves completely shot. I couldn't find my ID. My heart was pounding so hard it felt dangerous. I was on the verge of fainting from the mix of fear and pain. As I turned toward the wheelchair ramp, I caught movement in the corner of my eye, the car stopping abruptly beside the ramp, a door slamming open. I don't know how I did it, but I sprinted the final few feet, slapped my ID against the reader, and shouted at the door to open faster. I heard footsteps running behind me. The door opened just enough for me to slip inside. I slammed it shut. I heard bodies hit the door with a loud thud. Curses shouted through the glass. I didn't stay to listen. I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropping them, before unlocking the door to my flat complex. Once inside, my legs gave out. I collapsed to the floor and had the worst panic attack I've ever experienced. When I finally managed to pull myself together and climb the 3 flights of stairs, I crawled into my sister's apartment and woke her, telling her everything. She told me later I was so pale it terrified her. She insisted I sleep in her single bed that night. I didn't have the strength to refuse. The worst part was that it didn't end there. My sister went out far more than I did. She's able-bodied and stunning. About 3 weeks later, she called me late at night as she was heading home from a bar. She had spotted the exact same car I described. parked near the bus stop. She didn't wait to see if anyone was inside. She ran. She was faster than I ever could have been. She reached the building while I was already inside, opening the door for her just as the car pulled into the lane. After that, we warned everyone, left notes on the building door, posted in every university group we could find, and contacted the police. They told us they couldn't act unless they caught them in the act, but admitted it matched other reports that had sparked the blue van rumors. Neither of us saw them again before I finished my degree. But stories like ours kept surfacing across the city. As far as we know, they're still out there. 2 years later, it still haunts me. 6 months ago, I started working at a restaurant. Ever since, the alley behind it has unsettled me. The restaurant sits downtown, about 5 minutes from the U.S.-Mexico border in the Rio Grande Valley. The alley isn't directly behind the building. You pass the patio, the garage, then reach a side back door that locks automatically unless propped open. During the day, people pass through constantly. It's generally safe, though there's a significant homeless population. Most are harmless, and staff often give them leftovers. I work in the kitchen, often past 10 p.m. Normally, my boss doesn't let women take out the trash alone, especially someone my size. But since quarantine, staffing has been thin, and we usually go in pairs. That night was slow. We were cleaning up early. Around 9:45, I grabbed 2 half-full trash bags, assuming someone would follow with the rest. As I walked past the patio, my gut twisted. I hesitated at the door, telling myself to wait, but the smell was unbearable. I propped the door open with a brick and stepped into the alley. It was dark, silent. The only light came from the bulb above the door. I hurried to the dumpster, dumped the bags, and then a man stood up from the other side. He wasn't large, but he looked older, sweaty, agitated. He must have been crouched there waiting. I jumped back, heart pounding. He motioned for me to stop. He was too close to outrun. I assumed he was homeless. I told him I had no food. He shook his head and pulled out a knife. The conversation happened in Spanish. I told him I didn't have my purse, that I was working. He told me to come with him, gesturing with the knife. Somehow, I found the nerve to tell him to come inside with the trash. He stepped closer. I stepped back and told him my coworkers had seen me and were coming. He threatened to gut me if I screamed. I said, "Watch me." Then we heard footsteps. He ran past me and disappeared. My coworker John came out seconds later. He took one look at my face and stopped. I told him everything. He ran down the alley, but found no one, only familiar homeless men, who said someone had run toward the border. The police were called. They patrolled, took my description. I was allowed to leave early. John walked me to my car. He apologized for the lack of cameras. I tried to smile, but my stomach was in knots. They never found the man. I still work there, but I never take the trash out again. I don't know where the courage came from that night. I only know it saved me. Years later, working in criminal justice and loving horror stories, I know I can be paranoid, but my girlfriend and her roommate agreed. What happened next was disturbing. I was walking her roommate's dog late at night in a quiet New York suburb. In the middle of a roundabout, I noticed a black SUV stopped. Inside was a family, mother, father, and a young daughter, staring at me without blinking. They circled me repeatedly. Every time, all three stared. Even the child. When I tried to engage, they followed. When I stopped, they stopped. When I took out my phone and typed their license plate, they slowly drove away, then returned and sat there for 10 minutes. The blankness of their expressions terrified me. And then there was my childhood friend, E. She lived in a neighborhood so safe people left doors unlocked. Across from her house lived a kind family and their adult son, Tim, who had developmental disabilities. He waved at everyone. He was never creepy. One day, when E was homesick alone, Tim came to her door. He offered to guard her house. When she declined, he grew angry. Later, she woke to noises downstairs. Tim had entered through the cracked garage door. She hid in her parents' closet as he searched the house with a knife. She stayed hidden for hours. Police were called, reports filed. She went to therapy for years. She never spoke of him again. But she never stopped locking doors. Triple checking. Adding locks. Neither have I. Heat. 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 Heat.